You know that person you barely acknowledge in the elevator. The one pushing the cleaning cart while you pretend to look at your phone, just to avoid eye contact. Well, maybe she's seeing much more than you think. Because while you ignore, she observes. While you rush, she listens. And sometimes, what seems like just another anonymous face in the hallway is actually someone who holds the power to change the course of many stories, including yours. Now, picture this. The most powerful woman in the company decides to swap her high heels for worn-out sneakers. She leaves her designer blazer in the closet and puts on a simple uniform, a temporary badge, and grabs a mop, not for show, but to dive into a reality that many choose not to see. Crazy maybe, but that's exactly what she did. And what she uncovered behind the scenes of her own organization was so revealing. It flipped the entire company culture upside down. While everyone kept chasing promotions, bonuses, and meetings, she chose the opposite path, invisibility. And it wasn't to test productivity, it was to measure character. Because in a company, true leaders aren't the ones with the most followers or the fanciest reports. They're the ones who see people beyond their badges, who lend a hand without expecting anything in return, who show respect even when no one's watching. For an entire week, she swept more than just floors. She witnessed disdain disguised as haste, heard snide remarks whispered between meetings, took note of behaviors, reactions, and attitudes. Some treated her like furniture. Others didn't even offer a simple good morning. But there were exceptions, those rare souls who still carry kindness in their voice and respect in their gaze, even when they think no one's paying attention. These people, unknowingly, wrote the most beautiful parts of this story. And that's when this narrative becomes a mirror, because it reveals far more about who we are than about who we pretend to be. After all, the way you treat someone who seemingly has nothing to offer you says everything about the kind of person and professional you truly are. Life doesn't just measure competence by goals achieved, it measures by empathy, ethics, and humility. And in those invisible metrics, many failed without even realizing. They told you respect is earned through title, that kindness is a weakness, that leadership is about having the loudest voice. I hate to break it to you, but they lied, because the greatest transformations are born in silence, in small gestures, in the stories no one tells. And it was in that silence that the disguised CEO discovered who truly held the company together and who was just pretending to lead. When she revealed her identity, the impact was immediate. Eyes locked in shock, others hid in shame. Those who once ignored her now scrambled for excuses. But it was too late. The truth had already been seen, and no words were needed. Those who treated her with dignity, even without knowing who she was, were acknowledged and promoted. Those who mocked, humiliated, or simply ignored her had to rethink their values and sometimes, even their jobs. This isn't just a story of poetic justice. It's a wake-up call for an era where appearance seems to matter more than essence, where printed titles weigh more than lived character, where social media shows rehearsed smiles but hides real behavior. And in the face of that, this woman had the courage to do what few ever would: test a company from the inside out. Not with spreadsheets, but with humanity. You may have a brilliant MBA, fluent English, and an impressive LinkedIn profile. But if you can't treat the person who cleans your desk with respect, you still have a lot to learn. Because in the end, the world doesn't need more cold executives. It needs people who inspire, who listen, who have the courage to lead by example, even behind the scenes, who understand that the most transformative stories begin with the simple act of seeing others with dignity. So take a deep breath and ask yourself honestly, how have you treated those who cross your path? Is your respect consistent or selective? Are you kind only to those who can benefit you, or to everyone, even those who go unnoticed? Because believe me, the world spins, and when it does, you'll want to be on the right side of the story. Now, maybe you understand. This story wasn't about a disguised CEO, it was about you, about me, about all of us. Because every encounter, no matter how small, carries the potential to reveal our best, or our worst. And that's exactly why the actions we take in small moments can build or destroy great reputations. If this reflection made you uncomfortable, good. Discomfort is the first step toward transformation. And if it stirred something in you, share this story with someone. It might open the eyes of those still walking with their heads down. Not out of humility, but out of disregard. And who knows, maybe the next time you pass someone in the hallway, you won't just see, you'll truly notice. Helena arrived in her navy blue uniform, with soft steps and a quiet smile. No one noticed. She walked the halls like part of the furniture, there, but invisible. And it's funny how some stories begin in silence, isn't it? Because while some make noise with their titles, others quietly observe and build invisible revolutions. Helena didn't want the spotlight. She just wanted respect. What stands out most in situations like these is how the absence of a simple good morning says so much. Think about it. How many times have you passed someone without looking them in the eye? And I'm not just talking about companies. At the bakery, in the elevator, on the bus. The world is full of Helenas, People who carry incredible stories, but who we ignore because of their clothes, their job, their silence. And the most striking part, that indifference, which seems so small, is exactly what reveals the soul of a workplace. It's easy to smile at the boss. The real challenge is smiling at those no one sees. So here's a question. If you vanished from your job today, who would miss you? Helena, working quietly in the background, was beginning to write one of the most surprising stories that company would ever experience. In the middle of that sea of indifference, one figure stood out. Clara, the intern. Newly hired and still untainted by corporate habits, she was the only one who treated Helena like a real person. A genuine smile, a good morning that came with eye contact, and even a helping hand with the cleaning cart. Small gestures. Maybe, but it's precisely these gestures that change the course of certain stories. Clara didn't know it, but she was being watched. It's interesting how empathy, when it's real, doesn't need a spotlight. Clara didn't act out of self-interest or obligation. She acted because she felt it. And that is rare, but powerful. Sometimes, a fresh pair of eyes can see what others have long forgotten. And in these stories, the ones who seem naive are often those who see the farthest. You know that saying, kindness begets kindness. It's true, but incomplete. Kindness also reveals character, opens doors, and transforms reputations. Clara wasn't looking for recognition, but she planted something that would later bear fruit in ways no one expected. While everyone else kept ignoring, she was building real connections. And real connections always come back, especially when people start seeing differently. While everyone rushed through their routines, Helena was doing something few have the patience for. She was observing. Every hallway conversation, every sideways glance, every whispered comment thought to go unheard. She took note of it all. But not in a notebook, in her soul. And that's where many stories are born. In the silence of someone who doesn't need to impose herself to understand who's really in charge and who's just making noise. She saw how flattery increased in the presence of executives and how rudeness spread when titles disappeared from the rooms. She noticed who cleaned their own desk and who treated the cleaning staff like part of the dirt. Helena didn't judge. She learned. And that's a valuable lesson. Before trying to change the world, try truly seeing it. It's incredible what you discover when you observe without needing to be seen. If you've ever worked anywhere, you know this well. Some people only perform empathy when it's convenient, but it's in the background where the real stories unfold. And Helena, without saying a word, was already giving a masterclass in active listening. The curious thing is, even without being seen, she saw everything. And what she'd do with all that? Well, that part was going to surprise a lot of people. Renato was the typical manager who confused authority with arrogance. For him, hierarchy was a shield, and those below deserved little or no respect. He made jokes about Helena in the hallway, mocked the way she pushed the cart, and even stopped her from entering the meeting room. He said with disdain, "This is no place for people like you." Little did he know, he was paving the way for his own downfall, with name and surname written into future corporate stories. It's odd how people like that feel entitled to measure worth by job titles. Renato spoke loudly, interrupted coworkers, used fancy words to sound important but couldn't see the humanity behind a name badge. And if you've ever worked with someone like that, you know what I'm talking about. People who feed on ego but starve for humility. Worst of all, they drag down the entire company culture with them. But every story has a turning point. And Renato, without knowing it, was setting the stage for one. Each of his actions was a puzzle piece that Helena was putting together silently. Every sarcastic remark, every gesture of disdain. It was all adding up, because in life and in work, how we treat the invisible says more about us than any shiny resume. And while Renato laughed, Helena was writing something he'd never forget. The week carried on like any other, until the moment of the general meeting. Employees were called in under a veil of mystery, and, as always, the usual suspects filled the front seats, while the less important stood in the back. No one expected anything big, until the CEO took the mic, gave a half smile, and announced, "Today, you'll meet the new executive director of the company." The room fell silent. Then Helena was called to the front, the same Helena who, just yesterday, was pushing a mop cart. Eyes met in confusion. Some laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke. Others began to sweat. But it was her, the invisible woman, now revealed as a major investor and the top leader of the organization. The scene felt straight out of a movie, but it was real. And this kind of turnaround shows us something powerful. The greatest stories of transformation don't happen in spreadsheets, but in the quiet actions no one sees coming. Helena walked to the front of the room with the same calmness she'd shown all along, like someone who had always known this moment would come. And the beauty of it all lies right there. Power that doesn't need to show off. Leadership that doesn't scream, it simply commands by presence. The room, once loud and full of certainty, was now blanketed in a silence that said everything. And in that silence, a new chapter for the company was born, and those stories would never be ignored again. The moment Helena revealed her true identity, the atmosphere in the room shifted completely. The air grew heavy, as if all the words had escaped through the cracks in the windows. People lowered their eyes, avoiding the gaze of the woman they had dismissed just days ago. These are the moments when stories speak louder than speeches, because the discomfort doesn't come from the mistake itself, but from the wounded pride of those who thought they were above right and wrong. Renato, the manager, looked smaller than ever. The same man who flaunted his authority was now looking for somewhere to hide his shame. And that says a lot about corporate environments. It's easy to be kind when you know someone's title. The real test is being kind when you believe they have nothing to offer you. That's where the essence of real stories of leadership lives, in how we treat those who expect nothing from us. The silence that filled the room was more revealing than any apology. It was the weight of conscience, in real time, a kind of lesson that no MBA or motivational workshop can teach. Everyone there stood before a living, intense, unsettling truth. And Helena, without raising her voice, was about to teach something that would forever change how that company told its stories. Helena took the mic with the same calm she had when holding the broom just days earlier. She didn't accuse, didn't yell, didn't call out names, but she didn't sugarcoat the truth either. She said she'd spent the week watching, listening, and feeling. She spoke of stifled jokes, the looks that pierced through her like she wasn't there, the selective smiles. Then she paused. One of those pauses that doesn't ask for silence. It demands it because some stories hit deeper when told softly. She spoke about empathy, not as a catchy phrase for internal campaigns, but as a daily practice. She explained that respect starts in the eyes, in listening, in the way we treat those without power. And she cited examples that everyone had witnessed but pretended not to see. Helena showed that the true character of a company isn't in the values printed on the wall, but in the stories happening behind the scenes, the ones no one dares to tell. And it's curious how sometimes a simple speech can provoke more transformation than any mass layoff. That day, Helena didn't demand change. She inspired it, because when someone speaks from a place of truth, even those who've erred feel moved. The speech ended without forced applause, just silence. But it was a different kind of silence now, one that signaled something big was about to begin. In the midst of that whirlwind of emotions, Helena made a point of highlighting a gesture that few had noticed, but one she would never forget. She looked at Clara, the intern, and said, "In an environment where many ignored me, you saw me. Straight to the point. No flattery, no exaggeration, just truth." And it's that kind of recognition that turns ordinary stories into powerful human values within organizations. Clara, visibly surprised, didn't know how to react. After all, she never sought applause. She just did what she felt was right. And that's exactly what stood out. Kindness that comes from essence, not from strategy. Helena announced she would be promoted, not as a reward, but as a symbol. A living reminder that leadership is built through small actions, not grand speeches. And that's one of the greatest lessons we can take from these stories. You know what's beautiful about all this? That in a world where so many people fight to be seen at any cost, Clara stood out by seeing the other, the context, what lies beyond, the job title. And you can apply that today, wherever you are, at work, in your neighborhood, with your family. Because sometimes, a heartfelt good morning is worth more than 1,000 empty words. And those who plant respect harvest recognition sooner or later. After the meeting, the company didn't go back to normal, and that was a good thing. Helena wasn't looking for applause. She wanted change. And the first step was symbolic but powerful. Renato was reassigned to a support department, where he'd have to work daily with the people he once ignored. Not as punishment, but as an opportunity for a fresh start. Because some stories only change direction when we're forced to face what we always avoided. In addition, mandatory training sessions on empathy, active listening, and emotional intelligence were launched. None of those generic workshops that turn into LinkedIn memes. These were real encounters, with honest debates and practical examples. Employees started reflecting on whether and how they were contributing to the company's culture. And this began to echo in the small day-to-day actions. It was the beginning of a new way to live those internal stories. Here's a key point. Culture doesn't change with a motivational email or a nice quote in the lobby. Culture changes through consistency, through leadership by example, impactful decisions, and acknowledging mistakes. Helena understood this better than most. She knew transformation wasn't about punishment, but about building something more just. And believe me, when a company truly decides to value people, the stories start to blossom in a way the market can't ignore. The news spread like wildfire. But unlike so many corporate rumors, this one didn't carry malice. It carried a lesson. Helena's turning point became a topic in meetings, hallway conversations, even a reference in other departments. Not as some boss prank, but as a profound wake-up call. Because the best stories aren't the ones we tell to impress, they're the ones that make others rethink their own attitudes. And the most interesting part is that this story wasn't about titles or power. It was about character, about seeing others before they have to scream to be noticed. Helena didn't use her position for revenge. She used it to transform. She showed that real power lies in observing with humility and acting with wisdom. And that, my friend, isn't taught in a spreadsheet or learned just from a diploma. It's learned by living or by listening to stories like this. From that moment on, something changed in that company. Not overnight, of course, but it changed. The environment became lighter, the gazes more attentive, the gestures more genuine. Because when someone has the courage to use silence to teach, the impact stays. And maybe that's the greatest lesson of all. Never underestimate those who seem small. Some of the greatest revolutions begin with those nobody sees until they can no longer be ignored. Now tell me, with all honesty, how have you been treating those who can't promote you, applaud you, or follow you on social media? Have you ever truly stopped to think about that? Is your respect genuine or filtered? Because life, that invisible master screenwriter, loves to flip the script when we least expect it. And when it does, it's not your job title or your followers that hold you up. It's your actions, the way you treated those no one was watching, the tone of voice you used when you thought no one was listening. This story you just heard goes far beyond a corporate tale. It's a mirror. And, let's be honest, some reflections hurt. Because they show us things we spend our lives trying to hide. Snap judgments, indifference disguised as neutrality, the arrogance we normalize in the name of urgency. But maybe, just maybe, it's that discomfort you need to feel today to change your attitude tomorrow. Helena could be anyone. She could be the cleaning lady, the parking lot guard, the guy who brings the coffee, or the quiet intern in the corner of the room. People we, often without realizing, push into the blind spots of coexistence. And believe me, it's in these silent stories that life hides its most important tests. Because true character isn't revealed when you're in front of the boss. It shows when you're with someone who has nothing to offer you. And what if the disguise were on the other side? What if you were the one behind the temporary badge? Ever thought about that? It's easy to want empathy when we're down, but much harder to practice it when we're on top. Helena came in as a janitor, but she was there for a bigger reason. And what she saw wasn't just dirt on the floor, it was flaws in behavior, attitudes that don't appear in reports, but that shape the culture of any environment. Stories of arrogance, exclusion, everyday pride. And do you know what hurt her the most? Not the dismissive looks or the awkward silences, but realizing the problem wasn't individual. It was structural. Good people replicating contempt out of habit. Smart people who never stopped to think that respect doesn't depend on hierarchy. That's when she realized, if she wanted change, she had to start by exposing what no one dared speak out loud. And when Helena removed her disguise and revealed her true position, the ground shook. Many tried to justify themselves. Others apologized. But that wasn't the point. It was about learning. Because deep down, everyone was being invited to ask the same question. How do I treat those who can't give me anything in return? And that question, my friend, has no easy answer, but it does have consequences. It defines not only your future at work, but your mark on the world. Helena's story became an example, but it could easily have gone unnoticed. Like so many others, we live in a time where appearance weighs more than essence, where kindness is mistaken for weakness, where respect has become transactional. But if you've read this far, it's because something inside you still believes there's another way. That we can lead with humanity. That we can grow without stepping on others. That we can truly see people, even when the world tries hard to ignore them. So take a deep breath, and think, how would you behave if you knew you were being observed? And what if I told you someone is always watching, even in silence? The world is full of Helena's testing environments, searching for humanity where others only see performance. And what if, instead of chasing the next job title, you focused on the next person you'll meet along the way? Respect isn't a LinkedIn post. It's not a footer quote in a corporate slide deck. Respect is a daily choice. It's doing the right thing when no one is watching. It's saying good morning with your eyes, listening with your heart, treating everyone with dignity, even those you don't know. That's where the stories that truly matter are born, not in meetings, but in the moments that reveal who you are when the badge is off and the mirror remains. And if this video made you reflect, leave a comment below. What part touched you the most? Have you ever lived something similar? Do you know someone who needs to hear this message? Share it, because your experience might be the one that changes someone's perspective. And of course, if you want to keep receiving stories that speak to your mind and heart, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and join this community that believes that respect doesn't wear a badge, it takes action. At the end of the day, you know what remains? The stories, and you get to decide which one will be told about you.